Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mnemonic's EHS and Quality webinar series. This webinar will touch upon China's evolving EHS regulations. Before we begin, I would like to briefly introduce Mnemonic as a company, my role here, and of course, a presenter for today. Mnemonic is a software service that provides EHS managers with the tools necessary to ensure environmental, health, safety, and quality compliance in their operations. Mnemonic is both a web service as well as an app designed to help auditors inspect facilities for compliance issues, as well as stay on top of legal updates and maintain a legal register. In an endeavor to share knowledge and help organizations by spreading industry best practices, Mnemonic holds free webinars on a variety of EHS and quality topics throughout the year. We frequently post free auditing checklists, global EHS updates, and white papers on a variety of EHS topics on our social media platforms. So please like and follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter to stay up to date with global EHS trends. My name is Jessica Minhas. I'm the marketing manager at Mnemonic, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we will gladly address as many as we can at the end of the presentation. To present this topic to us today, we have with us Yusi Wang, who's a leading regulatory analyst in China with over 5 years of experience. So that's all for the introductions. I'm happy to say that we have attendees from all over the world joining us today. Thank you so much for participating. Without further ado, here is Yusi on EHS trends in China.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending the webinar. I am going to have a brief talk on EHS, Chinese EHS trends today. Stricter supervision under the reform of simplifying administration. I'm Yusi Wang. I am now working as regulatory analyst in Mnemonic Shanghai office. And thank you, Jessica, for hosting this webinar. In the following 30 or maybe 40 minutes, I am going to first give you a general idea on Chinese EHS by illustrating you a bit on the Chinese legal framework and presenting you a simplified workflow on how to open a factory in China. Then I will show you the latest governmental reform called the pipe suit and the successional governmental actions such as the administrative simplification before and after the construction of a project, changes on penalties for violation under the new revised environmental protection law and the new work safety related laws. And in the end, go back to see the spirit of the pipe suit and the conclusion on the recent Chinese EHS trends. Why I picked this topic is because of 3 reasons. Firstly, the EHS laws in China changes very rapidly these days. Secondly, not only the laws changed, half of the mandatory national standards have been converted into recommended standards, which means they are no longer effective, which is of course a big event in China, and you must wondering why. Lastly, as we all know, regulations and penalties are much more stricter now than before. So with the stricter penalty, it seems like those regulations are no longer paper tiger as before. They have vigorous penalties and much more enforcement tools. It's like now the tiger has more teeth. So as a person who already has business in China or who plans to start a business in China, have you ever had the following questions when hearing various changes in Chinese EHS issues? We always hear that the supervision becomes stricter, but how strict is this so-called stricter supervision under the reform of simplifying administration? And emission compliance rate in industrial companies is only about 70%. What is the future for the remaining in compliance 30% companies? And there seems to have a reform on national mandatory standards in China. About half of the national mandatory standards are going to disappear. Why is it? And how is that going to affect organizations in China? And also, are recommended standards important for companies? what are the main legislation changes in the past year, and what kind of company will be more competitive under the new EHS trends. And we always hear that China is going to lay emphasis on soil reservation. So, how is the supervision towards soil pollution now, and what is the new pollutant discharge license management system? To start with all these, let's first have a general look on China's legal frame and legislatures. And it might be kind of different from your country's legal system. On the top, we have our constitution, which defines the basic systems and the basic tasks of the state. And under the constitution, we have basic laws, such as environmental protection law of the People's Republic of China, work safety law, law on prevention and treatment of occupational diseases, and so on. And under the basic laws, we have special laws which focus on a certain topic, such as the law on prevention and control of water pollution, law on water and soil conservation. And together with the relevant laws, these are called laws. The Constitution stipulates that the National People's Congress and its Standing Committee exercise legislative power of the state to enact laws. Under all these laws, there are administrative regulations, such as administrative regulations on environmental protection of construction projects. The State Council formulates administrative regulations according to the Constitution and law. And under the administrative regulation, in the left hand, on the national level, we have departmental rules such as measures for environmental information disclosure. Most of the departmental rules related to EHS are usually issued by ministries under the State Council, like Ministry of Environmental Protection, who take care of all the environmental protection issues, and the State Administration of Work Safety, who is in charge of the occupational health and safety problems, and so on. So on the local level, in the right hand, we have local regulations and the rules of the local government. For example, regulations of Shanghai on environmental protection. The local regulations always are more specific, sometimes more stricter than the national regulation. So if you have a factory, for example, in Shanghai, you should follow both Shanghai and national legislation's requirement and to implement, of course, the stricter requirement. And okay, now let's see what kind of approvals you need to get for opening a factory in China. There are lots of procedures, of course, before the plan started, but I will just start with a company name pre-approval and only illustrated you the most important EHS-related things for opening a factory in China. First, you have to start preparing the EIA and SA, which stand for EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment, and SA, the Safety Assessment. At the same time, contact the local government with the land issues, planning issues, and other applications on different aspects. Then after your environmental impact assessment got approved, then go to get approval for the safety assessment, together with the OHA, which stands for Occupational Health Assessment, and the ESR Energy Saving Report. After all that, you can acquire your business license and go on with other procedures concerning the financial and other legal factors. And after all these steps, okay, now you can start to construct your factory. This simplified workflow is to give you an impression on what EHS administrative approvals are the fundamental ones in China. And then you can understand more clearly about the administration reform happening in China recently. So the recent very popular reform is called the pipe suit raised by Li Keqiang, the current premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China. And the State Council in China, that is the Central People's Government of the People's Republic of China, is the executive body of the highest organ of state power. This reform aims to simplify the administration, delegate power, strengthen regulation, and optimize governmental service. It is a nationwide reform. Over 600 items of administrative approval of the State Council level have been cancelled. So it's not just a EHS field thing. A funny example is before even you have like your birth certificate with your mom's name on it, but sometimes you still need a administrative certificate to prove that your mom is your mom. So this kind of unreasonable administrative items have been cancelled now. This reform also affects a lot in the EHS field for sure. In short, it affects the EHS operations in three aspects. Firstly, simplify the administrative procedures. Secondly, loosen the pre-event supervision while strengthening the post-event supervision. And lastly, governmental departments have optimized their service, which for sure makes EHS persons feel more comfortable when dealing with governmental authorities. Just imagine them with more smiles on their faces, and that's already not bad. Now we can see the changes in EHS world affecting by the pipe suit reform. We abstract the information by comparing the new revised regulations and their old ones. In the stage before the construction of your factory, in environmental aspect, before the reform, every kind of environmental impact assessment documents should be approved by the administrative department. And we have three types of EIA, environmental impact assessment, in China. Their registration form, report form, and report. That depends on the different environmental impacts that the projects will have. Now, after the reform, the project required a registration form, which is the one with the most minor environmental impacts, do not have to get approval anymore. You just need to go to record your environmental impact registration form to the administrative departments for archival purpose and no longer need to wait for their approvals. In the health aspect, before the reform, pre-assessment on occupational hazard should be conducted by a qualified professional institutions, but now after the reform, this pre-assessment on occupational hazard can be done by the companies themselves. And before, the pre-assessment report should be submitted to work safety departments for archival purpose or applied for their approvals. Now this procedure has also been cancelled, which means in the health aspect, before you construct your factory, the only thing you need to do is to prepare a pre-assessment on occupational health by yourself. In the safety aspect, we can see from this table the types of projects in ordinary field of industries which need a pre-assessment on safety is significantly reduced. Here, ordinary field means not in the scope of national or provincial key projects, not in the scope of extra risky industries and so on. So together with the previous two tables, these tables state the changes of administrative procedures before a project starts to construct. So in short, it indicates that before the reform, Lots of projects need approval on these documents from the governmental authorities, but after the pipe suit reform, lots of them are cancelled. Companies become more self-regulated, which you might think to start a project, build a factory in China is easier than before. Here is the administrative simplification after the construction of a project. We also abstract the information by comparing the new and old laws. After the completion of the construction of your factory, you cannot commence the formal operation immediately. You have to pass lots of acceptance checks in China. This acceptance check is mandatory for every project, and it is towards the environmental protection facility, occupational disease prevention facility, and the safety facility. The objective of acceptance check is to ensure that those facilities meet the corresponding requirements, and then the official production and operation can be commenced once after the acceptance check is passed. And so before the reform in environmental aspect, the acceptance check on environmental protection facilities should be conducted by environmental administrative departments. Now the new pollutant discharge license management system is going to be the new core of the environmental management system. It will replace the acceptance check for most of the projects. For those not in the scope of pollutant discharge license, a third party can be entrusted to conduct this environmental protection facilities acceptance check. And for health aspect, before the reform, acceptance check on occupational diseases prevention facilities should be conducted by work safety departments or submit to them for archival purpose. Now for all kinds of the projects, the organizations can do acceptance check by themselves, but a written report on the acceptance check procedure is required for future reference. And for safety aspect, it's quite similar as the health aspect. Before the reform, acceptance check on safety facilities should be conducted by work safety departments or submit to them for archival purpose. Now all of them can they can do acceptance check by themselves and don't need to submit the report to administrative departments, but just prepare a corresponding written report for future review or for the future check by the safety authorities. So at least give you an idea that, starting a business in China is more simple. Yeah, after listening the recent administrative reform in China, you must have an impression that it is easier to do business in China than before. But the answer is not, surprisingly no. I will just give you an example, a very simple and vivid example on how difficult it is now to do EHS and how the government strengthened post-event supervision. For the environmental aspect, yes, it is true that they don't need your environmental impact assessment be approved by them anymore. But the emphasis is now changed from environmental impact assessment approval to the on-site check, random visit on-site, no advance notice. They come to check your environmental documents, which are all the paperwork before has to be approved by the authorities, but no more now. To smell if there are any, for example, VOC smells in the factory. If they can smell any, they start to test the indicators immediately and impose a fine immediately. Because if the smell exists, it is the sign of incompliance in most circumstances. So now we start to hear more and more complaining from EHS person in China on how hard it is now to reach the government's standard, and EHS work is so hard to do. Let's go to see what if the organization violates the government requirement. In environmental aspect, the increasing penalty is clearly a strong enforcement tool under the new amended Environmental Protection Law. Before, the maximum fine was 200,000 RMB, but now there is no upper limit on fines. And consecutive daily penalty can be imposed, and a business can now be shut down if it doesn't comply. Directors could face criminal charges. Here is a typical environmental crime case I want to present to you and make you understand more about consecutive daily penalty. The total fine amount of this case is 15.8 million RMB. It is the Xianyang Municipal Environmental Protection Bureau, which is under the Shanxi province, imposed a 15.8 million RMB fine towards a state-owned company called Shanxi Coal Energy Company located in Xianyang Municipality. The fine was originally 100,000 RMB for discharging pollutants without a pollutant discharge license, and 100,000 RMB for air pollution prevention facility that didn't work well, didn't effectively prevent the air pollution. And the fine was imposed on January 8, 2015, and a demand of cease production to rectify was ordered at the same time. But this coal energy company is one of the biggest, most important company in that local area. You must figure that out by just looking at the company's name. State-owned energy company. So it just ignored the penalty, didn't stop the production, and continued to pollute until March 27, which is 79 days later. So according to the new environmental protection law, a consecutive daily penalty can be charged. 200,000 RMB times 79 days, which makes this big fine bill of 15.8 million RMB on the violation of environmental protection. No changes on the fine for violation of occupational health protection facilities. Maximum fine is still 500,000 RMB. But the fine for violation on safety protection facilities is tremendously increased from 50,000 RMB to 1 million RMB since 2015. This is a very recent work safety accident happened in DGK Component Company in Guangdong Municipality, in Dongguan Municipality under Guangdong Province. And it is a portal crane collapse accident under a typhoon weather. The portal crane was blew to the end of the rail, and because the wind was too fierce, the crane together with the rail fell down and dropped on a temporary constructor's dormitory nearby, which caused 18 dead, 33 injured, and 18.61 million RMB direct economic losses. The accident was because, firstly, no compliance on special appliance utilization procedure. There was no person in charge of the safety of this lifting operation on site. Secondly, the training for operators was inadequate. And thirdly, in China, portal crane is listed as a type of special appliances. The operator must hold a proper license to do the related operations. But in this case, this operator didn't have one. He just held a fake license. And lastly, there was no prevention for hazardous weather at all. So all of these hidden hazards, human errors, lack of proper working procedures caused this major accident. As consequence, 3 persons were detained and will face criminal charges soon. They are the operator who hold the fake license, the responsible person for the special appliances in DGK component company, and the manager who was the main person in charge of the DGK component company. Also, there are another 20 persons have faced different administrative penalties, including demotion and warning. They are persons from the company and also persons from related local governmental departments. Why I illustrate you this case is because I want you to know that the person in charge for a business now in China, his or maybe her legal liability is widely increased. This person can be subject to criminal liability even if he or she is not the person in charge of safety. But as a person in charge of a business, you should be fully in charge of and ensure all the safety issues. So after the amendment of 2014 work safety law, the person in charge who is liable for any serious or especially serious work safety accident shall not serve as the primary person in charge of any business entity in the same industry for life, and can be composed maximum a fine of 30% of his or her annual income in the prior year. So all these methods tremendously increase the manager or CEO's responsibility on safety in China. After knowing the administration, simplification, and stricter penalties in EHS fields under the effect of the pipe suit, we can see the spirit of the pipe suit. The premise of the pipe suit reform is the simplification of administration. It can also be interpreted as loosen the pre-event supervision. And the recent changes in laws give us a hint. The amendment of 12 laws, including the foreign trade law and the energy conservation law here, are all aimed to simplify administration by adjusting or canceling the pre-event administrative procedures in the laws. Local legislative power has been strengthened because the central government wants to delegate power to lower level and to make things more efficient. The premier of the state council once said, "We delegate power, simplify administration is an action to save time, and the time we've been saving we are going to use to enforce the implementation of the laws." And 50% of the mandatory standards have been converted into recommended standards that also embodies a gesture of loosen prevent supervision. For example, you have hot work in your site. Before, you have to follow the mandatory standard on hot work procedures, maybe to fill a standard application sheet required in the mandatory national standard before the work. But now you can do it on your company's own working procedures. It actually also simplifies the operations for companies because multinational companies always have their own working procedures. Like before, they have to follow 2 working procedures, but now only 1. But one thing shouldn't be forgotten is that you still have to control hot work safety properly because the violation penalties haven't been cancelled at all. And to the contrary, it has been strengthened. Because the foundation of the pipe suit is less prevent supervision, but more post-event supervision. So we can see from all angles of the government's actions that their policy emphasizes shifting from the pre-event supervision to the post-event supervision. And in order to effectively conduct the post-event supervision, lots of related laws and regulations have been released, and the feasibility of penalty has been strengthened. In addition to the new environmental protection law, the law of the environmental protection tax indicates that the new environmental tax system is going to replace a discharge fee system. Each type of pollution, air, sewage, solid waste, noise, is attributed a per unit rate. And the new measures for the clean production audit and the administrative measures for industrial energy conservation ask the factories, organizations in China must be green. And it means if you are not green, then you have no future in China. The pollutant discharge license management system is becoming the core in the environmental management system. Discharging pollutants without a legal license can also be imposed consecutive daily penalties, just as the case I mentioned in Xianyang municipality. And soil-related regulations make soil investigation and remediation compulsory for land use transfers associated with investment, merger and acquisition, and decommissioning. So now to start a business in China, selection of land is very essential. You must ensure your land has no problem. If you neglect this point, it could be very painful for you, for your organizations in the future. And of course, you mustn't cause pollution on your land during the production. Otherwise, also very painful. A new amendment which is a bit funny is that just in this month, the Ministry of Environmental Protection is asking for public comments for the amendment on measures for implementing consecutive daily penalties. Why I said it is funny because these measures were just issued 2 years ago. It is like kind of rushed to amend it now. But the reason why they are being amended is because based on the current case and the data, the ministry thinks this law enforcement tool hasn't fully played its role in the new environmental management system. After the amendment, the feasibility will be enhanced and the law enforcement will be further strengthened. This rapid action reveals the determination of Chinese environmental authorities on doing a good job in law enforcement. And after talking so many on the environmental aspect, let's have a quick look on the HS aspect. Here is the new work safety legislation frame, and it is composed by one law and 3 regulations. One law is the fundamental work safety law of the People's Republic of China, and 3 regulations are regulation on the implementation of the work safety law, regulation on work safety emergencies, and regulations on the reporting, investigation, and disposition of work safety accidents. The 2 regulations in light gray are the new ones, which just finished collecting public comments in the end of 2016 and will be released officially in the near future. So these 4 legislations called one law and 3 regulations management system will make the supervision for work safety more complete. All these frequent actions reveal that the Chinese government determines to do more in improving the environment and reduce the occupational and the safety hazards. So the big trend in EHS field is that the supervision will be more and more strict and will never go backwards for sure. And the current trend is the pipe suit spirit, simpler pre-event supervision and stricter post-event supervision. So for foreign companies that have operations in China or going to or want to do business in China, compliance becomes the new competitiveness. And you have to select carefully and gives your give your EHS engineers more power, because under this big reform, their work is even more difficult than before, and it is really not easy to attend the government's requirement. For those who has consulting services in China, it might be a great opportunity for you because less the government lay hands on the supervision, more guidance the company need for their compliance. And also consulting companies now can conduct acceptance check as a third party for environmental protection facilities. So it's like the service is boomed. And in addition, it's been thinking widely that industries like sensors and monitors making will have a bright future in China because of the new environmental protection law, because of the pollutant discharge license management system. Tons of self-monitoring devices are in demand. So that's basically all I would like to share with you today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
So thank you so much, Yusi, for that incredibly informative session on China's EHS trends. It is time for question and answers. Please drop down any last minute questions that you may have, and I will then proceed to share these with Yusi. But before I do, I would like to quickly point out that Mnemonic will love to be part of your efforts to improve your regulatory compliance. Please sign up for Mnemonic App's 20 days free trial to learn how Mnemonic App can help your organization meet all compliance obligations easily and efficiently. Or give us a call or send us an email to schedule a demonstration of Mnemonic App. With that in mind, we will tackle a few questions. So, you see, I have a question from Travis here. Thank you, Travis, for your question. Are EIAs required to be performed by a third party?
Sorry, are EIA required to
Be performed by a third party?
It is before the EIA. Let me check with the laws. And yes, before the EIA has to be prepared by a third party, but it's not any third party. It's a third party with the corresponding qualifications. Because in China we have, like I said, the construction projects are classified. They have different environmental impact. So they are classified based on the different environmental impact that the projects will have. And for those with serious environmental impact, there is only limited third party who can do the EIA. And for those with minor environmental impact to the environment, then the list will be much longer, the list of the third party.
There's another question you see from Jerry Strub. Are EIAs being rejected more often these days?
Are EIA be rejected? That is, but that is a very good question. Actually, I don't really know our ERA being rejected more frequently these days than before or what. It is the before the government they like making many efforts on supervising or guiding the company on how to do EIAs, how to prepare EIAs. Now they just loosen this kind of supervision and change it to the on-site check after the operation of a project. So I don't think EIA is as much important as before for the government, but of course EIA is important.
Thank you, Yusi. There's another question from Denise. We are shifting from pre to post checking, but where are now the requirements used by inspector to perform their inspection? Example, the VOC example that you gave. Two inspectors have two different smells abilities. Measurements must be done against a standard.
Um, yes, the emphasis of supervision is shifting, but for the inspectors, we have a lot of related standards and regulations that they can follow to inspect the. I don't know if I answered your questions. That the government is doing this kind of reform, and in order to like improve to control the EHS risks, they like they have to provide more regulations and laws that let company know how they can do it right and how they can comply with the requirements.
Sure. There's another question, Yusuf. This is from Hong Mei. Are fabric mills subject to EIA?
Are fabric subject to ERA?
Fabric mills subject to EIA.
Um, Actually, for EIA, like I said, we have three kinds of EIA, which is registration form, report form, and the report. In China, we have a law which clearly specifies what kind of project subject to what kind of EIA. So if your question is that specific, that we can send you a email on the providing all the information about the corresponding EIA form.
There's another question from Stuti Rampal. She says, the pipe suit, is it the main reason for the increase in strictness? Can I get a bit more insight on this, please?
Sorry, is that main reason of what?
Is the pipe suit, is it the main reason for the increase in strictness? Can I get a bit more insight on this, please?
Yes, the pipe suit is the it's like because in China, we cannot if we talk about EHS trend without looking at the government's policy, it will not be complete. So the pipe suit is recently the biggest trend, and it caused lots of actions from the government side. So I can say that yes, it is.
Sure, I'll take another question. This one is from Brian. For US companies doing business with suppliers in China, does the new pipe suit regulations require additional responsibilities on those doing business with Chinese companies?
Um, no, I don't think so, because actually a lot of people has been asking how is the pipe suit reform affect foreign companies in China, but it is actually the same for both foreign company or local company. The pipe suit is just aimed to like shifting the supervision emphasis from pre-event to post-event. The company, as long as they comply with the laws and regulations, it's like they are safe in China.
Sure. Another question from Jose. Is there a set of guidelines for the assemblage of pollutant management system?
For pollut, and yes, we have a new released pollutant discharge license management system, but for you said the guideline, it's not. I don't think it's released yet, because the pollutant discharge license management system is quite new now, and like the regulations around or help to illustrate this law more clear. They are still like in the process of stipulating, but they will be released very soon.
Sure. There's another question from Chuck. Who is financially liable for remediation efforts at the end of an operation?
Who is the
Who is
what?
financially liable for remediation efforts at the end of an operation?
Um, I um I I think I cannot answer this question. It's a little bit out of my scope, and I will note these questions and send you back the answers
Sure,
after
perfect.
consulting with the more qualified people.
Thank you, Yusi. I'll take another question from Brian. Can companies doing
Mm.
business with companies in China be held responsible or penalized for suppliers' environmental impacts or violations?
No, no, I don't think so. It's 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 a problem of how you think. Uh, Actually, we have this kind of laws that have specific requirements on the supplier's qualifications, including the supplier's performance on EHS. Maybe there is not so specific on 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 a certain point, like maybe the your supplier has violated once and it's banned on the suppliers list. That is not possible. But for the image of a big multinational companies, you have to pick your suppliers very carefully and not to choose those violates the laws frequently.
Thank you. I'll take another question from Jerry. Can your application load the central government and local regulations into the system for the environmental engineer to perform audits and be reminded of upcoming tasks?
I am not sure. Is that a question about the legal frame that I have presented earlier, the Chinese legislation legal frame?
Um, Jerry, if you're there, can you let us know, please?
Sorry, maybe one more time for the question.
Can your application load the central government and local regulations into the system for the environmental engineer to perform audits and be reminded of upcoming tasks?
I am. I don't
I
think I'm
think
the
we
best
can.
person to answer this.
I don't see
Yeah.
Jerry responding. You can. Um, we can send Jerry the answer later today. So meantime, I'll take another question. This is from Denise. Pollutant discharge license does not seem to group all the on-site specific requirements. Is there an equivalent of a certificate of authorization or Enviro right to operate?
Pollutant discharge license actually covers air, sludge, noise, and solid waste. Why this is like the new core of the environmental management system is because before um, all these kind of pollutants I mentioned, they are um, like the requirements on that is and discharging fee on that is separately in different laws. So this new released law is like a gather together of all these pollutant.
Sure. Um, I'll take another question from Carlito. What is the regulation if we export American hardwood lumber and logs to China?
Well, that is also a little bit out of the scope of that. I will also note these questions and search for answers to email you.
Okay, perfect. So there's another question uh, from Travis. What are the odor nuisance laws in China, and is odor included in the EIA in pollutant discharge license?
What are the old and new laws in
Odor
China.
nuisance laws in China, and is odor included in the EIA and pollutant discharge license?
Um, Actually, when I said old and the new laws here is that the um, the law has been amended or the law has been revised. Yes, it is included the EIA and the pollutant discharge license regulations. Those two regulations has recently been amended or revised.
Sure. Thank you, Yusi. I'll take another question from John. How will the pipe suit reform affect foreign companies in China?
Well, as I said, actually, it's the pipe suit reform is that affects samely on foreign companies and also on local companies. It aims to like shifting the supervision from pre-event to post-event, and there's no difference that the government treating local companies and foreign companies differently.
Sure. There's another question from Lillian. Why did government convert mandatory standards into recommended standard? What's the benefit?
Um, it's also because of the pipe suit that the benefit for government is to, like I've mentioned, is to save time, and the benefit for company is also to save time. For example, multinational company, they have their own working procedures, but before, if the standards are mandatory, that they must give the governmental authorities proof that they are following the mandatory standards. But now they don't have to provide such proofs, but they must be aware of the EHS risks, and because recommended standard doesn't equal there's no requirement.
Sure. I will come back to Jerry's question. Can your application load the central government and local regulations into the system for environmental engineer to perform audits and be reminded of upcoming tasks? I think Jerry is asking about Mnemonic app, if we can do it.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So
So,
I don't think I'm the best person to answer that.
all right. So, Jerry, for this, we will get back to you in an email. And I will take another question from Chuck. So many governmental approvals are cancelled. So in that way, the government can ensure EHS risks are under control.
Well, they are now doing like controlling the risks by like giving you a threat of the random on-site check. And the random on-site check on the paperworks, and also they enhance the different kind of law enforcement tools, including the consecutive daily penalties I've said, and they like to push company to comply with the regulation.
Sure,
So they just want the company to be more self-regulated on the risk control problems.
sure. We're getting a lot many questions here. We have like 7 minutes more. So I have a question here from Rob. If I want to hire EHS persons in China, what kind of qualities do you think are the most essential?
Well, that is a very good question. um, of course, the EHS persons has to like possess related qualifications and awareness of compliance. But in my point of view, the most essential is that the this EHS manager has to dare to say what is this dare to say is that he dare to communicate the real situation to his higher manager, and also he dare to ask the supplier to ask the workers to follow the safety procedure or this kind of thing. So I think the most essential is the communication skill, in my point of view.
Sure, you see. There's another question from Jerry. Are the local EHS regulatory inspectors in China trained well enough to perform the audits?
Um, that is a very good question too. The I believe that, like, you see, local is a big range of things. Like in big cities and Shanghai, Beijing, there is no problem that local inspectors, they are not trained well enough. But for the small cities, maybe I think the most critical problem is not that the inspectors are not well trained enough, is that the uh, the the local environmental protection departments in small places, that they don't really take environmental protection seriously. It's like the for example, they have a very important enterprise in the local area, and this enterprise, maybe, in China, relations are very essential in the whole society. So this kind of big company, they will have relations in the government. So even the local inspectors are well trained, but if the company, they just don't comply with the regulations, they just don't comply. That is the issues before. I think the things are improved nowadays, and this kind of situation will be more and more rare.
Thank you, Yusi. There's another question. You have not mentioned analytical data to document compliance with regulations. Is analytical data used as a primary driver in determining compliance? By Samuel.
Um, I also cannot answer this question, so I will note this and send you back.
Okay, perfect. So I'll take the question from Scott. Why did the Chinese government raise this reform?
Well, as I said, it is for the government. Maybe they have too much things to do, and so they want to save time from pre-event supervision, and to use the time they've been saving on post-event supervision to make things more efficient. So like every reform, it is like a test. They want to test if by doing in this method, if the environment, health and safety problems can be improved.
Sure. I will take one last question, Yusi, because we have just 2 minutes left for the webinar, and you can please send in all your questions and we will answer in an email. So the last question is from Jerry again. In reading Chinese EHS news, I keep hearing the inspectors are being denied entry to the plant. Is this legal, and are there legal repercussions in doing this?
Oh, well, this is of course illegal, but just as I have said, um, it's like a battle between the very powerful companies, the very powerful state-owned companies, and the environmental protection authorities. But the environmental protection authorities is also from the government's side. It is because we are still in the progress of developing, so there will be a lot of conflict. Some represent some kind of interest, and some other determined to doing a good job on environmental protection. So yes, the things you've been reading on news, that really does exist, but I still the same word, that I believe things will be improved.
Sure. There are so many questions still, but we will address all the questions in an email. You can also send us an email at info@mnemonic.com, or you can give us a call. And thank you so much once again, Yusim, for this incredibly informative session. Please note that we will send you a copy of the slides as well as a recording of this presentation later today or at the beginning of the day tomorrow. So please send us an email at info@mnemonic.com, or give us a call, or even try Mnemonic app. It's 20 days free trial. And we will see you at the next webinar soon. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day. And we will hopefully hear from you soon. Thank you so much.